back. This is Boomer Life on CISL 650.
If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you a house. I would buy you a house.
What a great old song, huh? The Bare Naked Ladies and If I Had $1 Million, appealing to every Canadian's favorite pastime, lottery fantasies. Because we all know what we would do, just given that opportunity to take that $1 million and take it for a ride. We're talking about debts and debt problems, and more specifically, friends, solutions to debt problems. They are massive, as we're learning more and more of us getting into more debt difficulties. Brett Luckin is with us from Abakhan and Associates. They are trustees in bankruptcy and proposal administrators with offices in Prince George, in Vernon, Vancouver, Surrey, and also in Victoria. Brett Luckin has traveled pretty much every square mile of British Columbia in the years he's been part of Abakhan, because this company, unlike some others, believes very strongly in if a person's in trouble, they give us a call and ask for our help. We get to them and help them sort it all out. Right, Brett?
That's true, yes.
Wanted to talk to you more about Canada Revenue Agency. You had some rather eye-popping remarks there just before the break about some kind of new, more aggressive attitude on the part of the revenue company with respect to back taxes. Many of us, and this is for myth-busting or not, many of us are completely convinced that Canada Revenue Agency, or Revenue Canada as we used to call them, has some kind of special status with special powers to compel us to do things that other people we owe money to, Brett, can't. Is that true?
It is and it isn't. There is a level at which there is certain debt to Canada Revenue Agency that you may owe, which has a special status or priority. And what that is, though, that generally only affects self-employed individuals who run a sole proprietorship. In other words, they have employees and they pay them literally out of their own pocket.
Okay.
You know, let's say construction again. I think I mentioned that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Construction is a really good example of that. If you make a deduction from an employee's wages, income tax, and you do not render that to Canada Revenue Agency, source deductions.
Right, of course.
That has a special priority, and that survives anything and everything. Not survive bankruptcy as much as what it is. It's referred to as a property claim. Without getting into too much technicality, it's a debt that attaches itself to everything you own. So if there's one thing you don't ever want to do as a sole proprietor is shortchange Canada Revenue Agency on source deductions debt. That will come back and haunt you in a nasty way.
Okay.
Otherwise, generally speaking, all other debt you owe Canada Revenue Agency, like income tax debt, GST, those kinds of things, those sorts of things can be dealt with pretty much like anything else, largely pretty much like a credit card or anything. It's as compromisable as any other debt. They do have some powers in that there are some special sections of the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, which means that if you run up too much income tax debt, Canada Revenue Agency can bring the power of the state to bear on you and potentially do what's called oppose your discharge. Namely, you get to the end of your bankruptcy and you want to come out and you owed a hell of a lot of income tax debt.
Right.
Canada Revenue Agency does not like you just to walk away from that by washing it away inside a 1 or 2 year bankruptcy. And they may oppose your discharge and keep you in bankruptcy for longer or create some kind of condition, monetary condition.
So what's the threshold for this sort of behavior to anger the revenuers?
$200,000.
Okay, so that's...
And it's fact codified. That's actually written in law.
I see. So once you're past $200K to the feds, you are in deep trouble.
You are. I don't know how it works, but I'm sure a little red flag pops up on a screen somewhere. Having said that, I've seen them behave fairly sort of punitively towards people who are under $200,000.
Right.
But that tends to become a behavior issue and how you ran your business and did you make promises you didn't keep,
right,
etc., that kind of thing. $200,000, though, is the line in the sand for them from an income tax point of view. You jump over that and you can be fairly sure they will pay a lot of attention to you.
One of the things that you hear, you and your colleagues at Abakhan and Associates, quite frequently from people, because by the time a person is going to come to see a trustee in bankruptcy, he or she has been through the mill. They've had letters and harassing phone calls and all of that sort of thing. But one of the bits of advice, as I recall from previous conversations with you and the tax department for any person is, whenever possible, and you advise this for all of your creditors, but especially with Revenue Canada, if they send you something, for goodness sake, open it up,
open and
read it,
yeah.
and if necessary, send the reply back. Tick a box and send it back. It's the ignoring, it's the refusal to in any way communicate with them that makes them really crazy.
I agree with you. In fact, yes, I advise that all the time. Too often I see people who come and see me and admit openly that A, they haven't opened any of the envelopes that have been sent to them for the last year, sometimes longer.
There's a big collection of them in a box
They
somewhere.
do not take the telephone calls anymore either.
Right.
And the real challenge with that is the obvious, and that is that you may be completely unaware of the fact that one of your creditors, whether it's CRA or other, has already gone through a full process of getting judgment with you at court, against you in court, and may well be this Friday garnishing your wages or your bank account, freezing all your assets.
And they are required by law to inform you of these various stages of discipline that they're about to lay on you, right?
Indeed, but of course...
So if you're not opening the letters...
But if you don't open the letter, you're never going to know
you don't have a
this.
clue.
Right, exactly.
And all of a sudden you're being garnished one day. Surprise, surprise.
And that happens occasionally. I would say I probably speak to at least 1 or 2 people a month who are phoning 2 days after they lost money off their wage, and appear to be obliviously unaware. They knew they owed the bank some money, but just hadn't bothered to open any of those envelopes or take any of those phone calls. And that's without a question, that's the wrong thing to do.
Right. It is the wrong thing to do, but Brett, you're a pro. You've been at this for a number of years, and you can, in a strange way, at least understand why people get to that point in their lives where another, for sure it's got the collection agency marker on it this time instead of the bank logo on the envelope. Well, that's going in the round file because I know what that's going to say.
Yeah.
I'm not going to open that. I don't need to. And people just, they stop connecting with that problem. And then, of course, creating an even larger one in the process.
That's right. And you know what? And again, the next thing that I can tell you that without question, I can recommend people to do is, I think you and I discussed this a little bit earlier, the whole thing about there's this program on television on Discovery Channel called Mayday.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about planes that crash, and they do this sort of basically this analysis of what resulted in ultimately the crash.
The reconstruction
of the event.
Sure.
But what's fascinating about that is that by and large, virtually all of those accidents are never as a result of a single event or a single issue.
Okay.
It's always a combination of a whole bunch of things that build up on themselves. Human error, the failure of some kind of process, administrative process, a part that fails.
Mm-hmm.
It's never one thing. And insolvency is a hell of a lot like that. Insolvency is very rare that a single event in your life will overnight create an insolvency issue for you.
True.
It generally tends to be a whole accumulation of factors over a period of time. Even losing your job is not necessarily instantaneously mean that you're going to have to go bankrupt, because if you've been managing your financial life intelligently prior to that, you may well be able to easily survive 3 or 6 months without any guaranteed income. But if, of course, you've not been doing that and you've been running your life paycheck to paycheck, completely beyond your ability to be able to manage any kind of event such as illness, loss of job, family member that requires your help, then when that event occurs, that part breaks on the plane, it's going to come falling out of the sky.
Right.
And so dialing that back to what you were saying earlier, the whole thing is that as soon as you think you're in trouble, things are starting to go wrong on you, using a trustee who does not charge for the initial consultation and has an in-depth knowledge of how the legal process works and is not vested from a nature in terms of money, because we are tariffed, we are told what we are allowed to charge, and I cannot charge you money and then put that in my own bank account and then you file a proposal 2 weeks later. I have to use the money you gave me, and I have to put it inside your proposal or your bankruptcy.
Okay.
So I'm not vested in when you come and see me and saying to myself, "Well, you're a money a tree for me. That's not the way I see you at all. It's my job as a professional to give you the kind of advice you need to help you. So why that's so important is that when you think that there are problems, don't allow all these issues to pile up on you, and eventually you have no option but to go bankrupt.
Right. Well, and
come and see me.
Right. Well, that and here though is where in some cases, certainly not all, Brett, but in some cases, people allow those bits to accumulate, and then the pile becomes awful, and they end up in your office across the desk from you, working the Kleenex box like crazy, and going, well, I guess I got to go bankrupt. I guess that's why I'm here. I'm at the end of my tether. I guess I got to go. So where do I sign?
Yeah,
and the first thing you get to say is, well, maybe not.
Maybe not. And not only do you not have to go bankrupt, but very often there are other alternatives available to you. The obvious one is something called a consumer proposal, which allows you to completely avoid bankruptcy, avoid any implication to your assets whatsoever, and compromise your debt, sometimes as low as 20 cents on the dollar to your creditors.
What's the difference between credit consolidation and a consumer proposal?
A credit consolidation is generally offered to you through someone like a credit counselor or a debt settlement arranger.
Okay.
These are not trustees in bankruptcy, so they have none of the powers that a trustee does, and they do not have the ability to compromise your debt completely across the board. In other words, every single creditor will be dealt with exactly the same. They don't have the ability to do that. Only a trustee in bankruptcy can make sure that every single one of your creditors are treated identically. So if you're making an offer of 20 cents on a dollar, everybody gets that.
Okay.
And in a consumer proposal, you only need 50 cents on the dollar or more. So 50 plus 1, the majority of the dollar value of your debt, to say yes, and everybody else is dragged with. While credit consolidation, generally speaking, you are forced to deal with each creditor individually.
Right.
Some can choose to agree, some can choose to disagree, or you may have varying levels of agreement where one guy will not negotiate at all, while someone else will take 60 cents on the dollar.
So a credit consolidation may work, or may be a pretty scattered arrangement, whereas a consumer proposal is ironclad because it's so clearly defined.
Completely. It's a federal government act. The Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act is a federal government act, and it defines very, very clearly the rules and regulations that approach it.
Okay.
It's not informal. It's a completely formal process.
Well, we'll find out about the completely formal process. It's not bankruptcy either. That's best news so far in this program. Brett Luckin is a trustee with Abakhan and Associates. Online, by the way, at abakhan.com, Abakhan. And when you hit the website, you can find out about the 5 offices all over British Columbia and all the contact points for Brett and all his colleagues at Abakhan and Associates. We'll find out lots more about consumer proposals when we continue after this.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CISL 650.